The Galactic Council chamber was packed that day. Representatives from 100 different worlds sat in their crystalline seats, their forms ranging from floating energy beings to massive creatures that looked like walking mountains. At the center of it all stood Earth's representative, a nervous diplomat named Director Hayes, sweating through his formal uniform. "The matter is settled," announced High Counselor Vex, his voice echoing through the massive hall. His body was made entirely of living crystal, refracting light in 1,000 directions as he spoke. "The Dragon Dominion has demanded tribute from all Council worlds. Earth will provide theirs within the week." Hayes cleared his throat. "With respect, Counselor, Earth is barely a member species. We've only been part of the Council for 3 years. Surely there are other worlds more capable of—" Silence. Vex's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your species has contributed nothing to this Council. No technology we don't already possess. No resources we cannot find elsewhere. No abilities worth mentioning. You are here as a courtesy, nothing more." The other delegates murmured in agreement. The Zenari, with their telepathic hive minds, looked down their elongated snouts at Hayes. The Krell, immortal beings who had existed for millennia, barely acknowledged Earth's representative at all. Even the smaller species, the ones who had joined the Council only decades before humanity, seemed eager to distance themselves from the newest members. Hayes tried again. "But what exactly does the Dragon Dominion want? What kind of tribute?" A thin smile crossed Vex's crystalline face. "Living tribute. The dragons are carnivorous, after all. We've already selected Earth's contribution. A human named Jake Mitchell. He's currently in detention on Colony Station 7. You can't just—" "We can. We have. This session is adjourned." Vex brought down his staff, and the sound reverberated through the chamber like thunder. Hayes stood there, helpless, as the other delegates filed out. Nobody met his eyes. Nobody offered support. To the Galactic Council, humanity was an embarrassment. A species that had barely figured out faster-than-light travel, with no telepathy, no natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities. Just soft, short-lived creatures that broke easily and died after only a century if they were lucky. And now they were sending one of those soft, breakable humans to be eaten by dragons. On Colony Station 7, Jake Mitchell was lying on his bunk when the guards came for him. He'd been expecting some kind of trial, maybe a hearing. Instead, they just injected him with something that made the world go fuzzy and dark. When Jake woke up, the first thing he felt was heat. Not the comfortable warmth of a sunny day, but the kind of oppressive, crushing heat that made every breath feel like inhaling fire. His wrists and ankles were bound with some kind of metal alloy to a stone altar. Above him, the sky was a swirling mix of red and orange, volcanic clouds that rumbled with distant thunder. Jake's head pounded as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The last clear memory he had was refusing a direct order from Commander Phillips. They'd been on a peacekeeping mission, and Phillips had wanted to fire on a civilian transport that might have been carrying weapons. Jake had been the weapons officer. He'd refused to press the button. That refusal had cost him everything. His career, his reputation, his freedom. And now, apparently, his life. The ground beneath the altar trembled. At first, Jake thought it was an earthquake, but then he saw them. Dragons. They emerged from the volcanic cliffs like shadows taking solid form. The first one was massive, easily the size of a passenger shuttle, with scales that gleamed like polished rubies in the firelight. Behind her came others, gold, black, bronze, each one more terrifying than the last. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when they moved, the sound of their claws on stone was like thunder. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd seen pictures of dragons in the council databases, but those sterile images hadn't prepared him for the reality. These creatures radiated power. When they breathed, the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat. The largest dragon, the one with crimson scales, approached the altar. Her head was bigger than Jake's entire body. She lowered it slowly, examining him with one enormous amber eye that seemed to see right through him. Jake knew he was going to die. The council had sent him here to be food, and there was nothing he could do about it. But something inside him, the same stubborn pride that had gotten him court-martialed, refused to let him go out begging. "I won't beg," Jake said, his voice hoarse from the sulfurous air. "If you're going to eat me, just make it quick." The dragon's eye widened. Around the circle, the other dragons stirred, growls and hisses erupting from dozens of massive throats. The crimson dragon pulled her head back sharply, as if Jake had struck her. Then a voice filled his mind. It wasn't like hearing words, it was deeper than that, more fundamental. The voice was ancient and feminine, carrying weight that made Jake's bones ache. "You speak." Jake blinked. "Yeah. I speak. You're surprised?" The dragon studied him for a long moment. "In all the centuries we have received tribute from the Council Worlds, not once has the offering spoken. They send us their criminals, their outcasts, their broken things. Creatures so far gone they cannot even form words." A massive black dragon pushed forward through the crowd, smoke curling from his nostrils. "This changes nothing, Matriarch Cyrilleth. Look at him. Weak. Small. His species is a joke to the entire galaxy. The Council mocks us by sending this soft thing." Other dragons murmured agreement. Jake could feel their contempt radiating like heat from their scales. But Cyrilleth didn't move. Her amber eyes remained fixed on Jake. Perhaps. Or perhaps the Council has finally made a mistake that will cost them dearly. She turned to address the assembled dragons. "This human has fire in him. I can sense it. The question is whether that fire is worth kindling or snuffing out." "Test him," suggested a younger dragon, her scales the color of burnished copper. "Give him the trial by fire. Let him prove his worth or die trying." Vorgath, the black dragon, snorted flame. "A waste of time. He'll be dead within hours. Then it costs us nothing." Cyrilleth's mental voice carried a note of finality. "But if he survives, we will have learned something interesting about humans." She turned back to Jake, and the chains binding him suddenly glowed red-hot before shattering. Jake fell forward onto his hands and knees, gasping. 3 days, human called Jake Mitchell. Survive in the wasteland for 3 days. No food provided. No water. No shelter. Only your wit and will to live. Cyrilleth's massive head lowered until her eye was level with his. "The Council believes your species is worthless. Prove them wrong. Or prove them right. Either way, we will finally know the truth." The dragons took flight, their wings creating windstorms that nearly knocked Jake off his feet. Within moments, he was alone on the volcanic plain, the heat pressing down on him like a physical weight. Jake looked around at the hostile, alien landscape. In the distance, rivers of lava carved glowing paths through black rock. Volcanic vents spewed steam into the poisonous air. Nothing green, nothing living, nothing remotely welcoming. 3 days. Jake started walking, his mind already working on the problem. He'd survived worse odds before. Maybe not much worse, but worse. And he'd be damned if he was going to let a bunch of oversized lizards and smug council aliens be right about humanity. If they wanted to test him, he'd show them exactly what a human could do when backed into a corner. He'd show them all. The first hour was the hardest. Jake's throat was already dry, and the heat made every breath feel like swallowing sandpaper. The volcanic rock beneath his boots radiated warmth that seeped through the soles, making his feet ache. He knew he had maybe 6 hours before dehydration became a serious problem. In this heat, probably less. But Jake had spent 2 years stationed on the desert moon of Epsilon 9 during his military service. He knew the basics. Find shade first. Find water second. Food could wait. The problem was that shade didn't really exist here. The sun, or whatever this moon orbited, beat down mercilessly, and the black volcanic rock absorbed every bit of heat. Jake moved carefully along the base of a cliff, running his hand along the stone. Different rocks held heat differently. His engineering instructor at the academy had drilled that into him during survival training. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A section of cliff face where the rock was smooth and dark gray instead of black. He pressed his palm against it and nearly laughed with relief. Cool. Not cold, but significantly cooler than everything around it. These rocks had a different mineral composition, something that didn't absorb heat as readily. Jake followed the gray stone and found a narrow crevice leading into the cliff. Inside, the temperature dropped by at least 20 degrees. It was still hot, but survivable. He slumped against the wall, letting his body cool down, forcing himself to breathe slowly to conserve moisture. That was day 1. Survive the heat. Day 2 was about water. Jake emerged from his cave at dawn, when the temperature was merely oppressive instead of lethal. He'd spent the night thinking, remembering every piece of survival knowledge he'd ever learned. Water could be found anywhere if you knew where to look. He studied the volcanic landscape with new eyes. Steam rose from vents scattered across the plain. Where there was steam, there was water vapor. And water vapor had to condense somewhere. Jake made his way to the nearest vent, staying low to avoid the worst of the heat. The steam scorched his face as he got close, but he persisted. He examined the rocks around the vent until he found what he needed, a small cave where the steam flowed in but had nowhere to go. The ceiling was covered in moisture. It took hours of patient work. Jake used a flat piece of volcanic rock to scrape the condensation into a small depression in the ground. The water tasted terrible, like rotten eggs and metal, full of sulfur and minerals. But it was water. He drank it slowly, fighting his body's urge to gulp it down. Too much too fast would make him sick. By midday, he'd collected enough to sustain himself. But he needed more than water. Jake spent the afternoon exploring, moving from shadow to shadow, conserving energy. Near another thermal vent, he spotted something that made him stop in his tracks. Plants? Well, not plants exactly, but some kind of fungus growing in thick clusters around the superhot rocks. He knelt down, examining them carefully. The caps were a dark purple-black color, and they had a leathery texture. Jake racked his brain, pulling up memories from his engineering courses. They'd studied extremophile organisms, life forms that thrived in conditions that would kill almost anything else. These fungi were used in the manufacture of heat-resistant materials for ship hulls. If they could survive in these temperatures, their cells must have some kind of natural heat tolerance. Which meant they probably weren't toxic. Probably. Jake picked one of the smaller fungi and took a tiny bite. The taste was awful, like charcoal mixed with rubber, but he didn't immediately fall over dead. He waited an hour. No nausea. No dizziness. His gamble had paid off. He ate 3 more of the fungi, forcing them down despite the horrible taste. His body needed fuel, and this was the only option available. That night, back in his cave, Jake allowed himself to feel something like hope. 2 days down. 1 to go. But the dragons weren't going to make day 3 easy. Jake woke to the sound of wings. A young dragon landed at the entrance to his cave, blocking the exit with her massive body. Her scales were the color of burnished copper, and her eyes gleamed with curiosity rather than hostility. "I am Kyreth," the voice filled his mind. "Daughter of matriarch Cyrileth. My mother thought you would be dead by now. I am pleased that you are not." Jake stood up slowly, his muscles stiff and aching. "Thanks, I think. Is the trial over?" "No. You have survived the wasteland. Now comes the riddle of flames." Kyreth stepped aside, gesturing with her wing. "Follow me, human Jake Mitchell." They walked together across the volcanic plain, the dragon moving slowly to accommodate Jake's shorter stride. Other dragons watched from the cliffs, their eyes tracking his every movement. Kyreth led him to a massive stone archway carved into the side of a mountain. The arch was covered in symbols that glowed faintly within a fire. Dragons of all sizes had gathered around it, and they parted silently as Jake approached. "For 300 years, our scholars have attempted to solve this riddle," Kyreth explained. "It is said that only one with true understanding of fire can unlock its secrets." Jake studied the symbols. They weren't like any language he'd seen before. The patterns seemed random at first, but as he stared at them, something clicked in his mind. These weren't words. They were chemical formulas. Equations representing combustion, oxidation, heat transfer. The dragons had been trying to solve it like a linguistic puzzle, but it was actually a chemistry problem. Jake's fingers traced the symbols, pressing certain ones in sequence. Oxygen levels. Fuel ratios. Ignition temperatures. He rearranged them not by their meaning in dragon culture, but by the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. The archway suddenly blazed to life, flames erupting along every carved line. The dragons roared in shock and amazement. Even the massive Vorgath, the black dragon who'd wanted Jake dead, looked impressed. "Impossible," Vorgath rumbled. "How did a human solve what dragons could not?" Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. "Different perspective, I guess. You were looking for meaning. I was looking for math." Cyrileth descended from above, landing with enough force to shake the ground. 2 trials completed. Now comes the final test. Her amber eyes fixed on Jake. "You must retrieve the heart of Drakmar from the core chamber. It rests in a pool of molten stone. Many dragons have died attempting this trial." Jake's stomach dropped. "You want me to reach into lava?" "If you wish to prove your worth, yes." They led him to a massive cavern deep beneath the mountain. The heat was overwhelming, worse than anything Jake had experienced in the past 3 days. In the center of the chamber, suspended over a pool of churning lava, was a crystal the size of his fist. It pulsed with red light, and even from a distance, Jake could feel the heat radiating from it. There was no way to reach it. The pool was too wide to jump across, and anything that got close to that lava would instantly burn. The dragons watched silently, waiting for him to fail. But Jake wasn't looking at the lava. He was looking at the cavern itself. The support structures. The way the ceiling was reinforced with metal veins running through the stone. The ancient chains hanging from above, probably used to lower mining equipment centuries ago. His mind started working through the problem like an engineering puzzle. Weight distribution. Leverage. Heat resistance. I need materials, Jake said. Metal. Cable. Volcanic rock. The dragons looked at each other, confused. But Kyreth nodded. Show us what you need. Jake worked through the night, his hands blistering as he constructed a crude mechanical arm using scrap metal and stone. He created a basket from heat-resistant volcanic rock, connected it to chains with a pulley system. The design was rough, barely functional, but it followed basic engineering principles. When the sun rose, Jake activated his creation. The basket swung out over the lava, dipping down toward the crystal. The heat was so intense that the metal glowed red, but the volcanic rock held. Jake manipulated the controls, his hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The basket closed around the crystal. Jake pulled the chains, hauling it back across the lava. When the crystal finally reached solid ground, the assembled dragons erupted in roars that shook the entire mountain. Jake picked up the heart of Drakmor, holding it high despite the burns on his palms. Then his legs gave out, and the world went dark. The last thing he heard was Cyriletha's voice in his mind, Vorgath, it seems we were both wrong about humans. Jake woke up in darkness, but it wasn't the kind that scared him. The air was cool and smelled faintly of minerals and something sweet he couldn't identify. Soft light emanated from crystals embedded in the cavern walls, casting everything in a gentle blue glow. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, every muscle in his body screamed in protest. Easy, human. Cyriletha's voice filled his mind, gentler than before. You nearly died. Your body needs time to recover. Jake looked down at his hands. The burns that should have been there, the ones he remembered from handling superheated metal and volcanic rock, were gone. In their place were thin silvery scars that traced across his palms like spiderwebs. What did you do to me? The massive crimson dragon shifted in the shadows, her scales catching the crystal light. Dragon fire can destroy, Jake Mitchell. But it can also heal. It is an ability we rarely use, and never on outsiders. She paused. You are the first non-dragon I have ever healed in my 4,000 years of life. 4,000 years. The number hit Jake like a physical blow. This creature had been alive since before humans had even left Earth's solar system. Before the Council existed. Before humanity knew they weren't alone in the universe. Why? Jake asked simply. Why save me? Because you earned it. And because I am curious about what a human with dragon fire in his veins might become. Over the following days, Jake's strength returned. Kyreth visited often, bringing him strange fruits from caverns deep below the surface where underground rivers created small ecosystems. She was fascinated by everything about him, how humans thought, how they problem-solved, what their world was like. Tell me about Earth, she said one day, settling her copper-scaled bulk near the entrance of his healing chamber. Jake smiled, leaning back against the smooth stone wall. It's beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, mountains that touch the clouds. We've got deserts and frozen wastelands and everything in between. Not as hot as here, thank God. The Council says humans are a weak species. That you have no special abilities. They're not wrong, Jake admitted. We can't read minds like the Zenari. We don't live forever like the Krell. We can't manipulate energy or change our shape or breathe in space. Compared to most Council species, we're pretty ordinary. Yet you survive trials that have killed dragons. Because ordinary doesn't mean weak. Humans are good at one thing, we adapt. Give us a problem, we'll find a solution. Give us a wall, we'll either climb over it, dig under it, or blast through it. We're stubborn like that. Kyreth made a sound that might have been laughter. I think I like humans. It was during his second week of recovery that Cyrileth finally told Jake the truth. He'd been exercising in the main cavern, testing his healed body, when she landed beside him with enough force to send dust swirling through the air. Walk with me, she said. There are things you should understand. They moved through tunnels carved into the volcanic rock, passing chambers where dragons worked on intricate metalwork or studied ancient texts carved into stone tablets. Jake was struck by how civilized it all was. These weren't mindless beasts. They had a society, culture, art. Cyrileth led him to a massive chamber where the walls were covered in murals. Beautiful, detailed paintings showed dragons living on lush green worlds, working alongside other alien species, building magnificent cities. This was us, Cyrilleth said quietly. 800 years ago. We lived on 5 garden worlds, sharing knowledge and resources with dozens of species. We taught metallurgy to the Krell. We helped the Zenari develop their first spaceflight technology. We were the Council's greatest allies. What happened? Fear. The word hung heavy in the air. We were too powerful. Too independent. Some council members began to worry. What if the dragons decided they wanted to rule instead of cooperate? What if they turned their fire against us? Jake watched as Cyrilleth moved to another mural. This one showed fire, destruction, dragons fleeing through space. They manufactured evidence of dragon aggression. Claimed we had attacked a council outpost, though we had done no such thing. Before we could defend ourselves, the vote was cast. Dragons were declared a threat to galactic peace. Cyrilleth's mental voice cracked with ancient pain. They burned our worlds. Killed our young. Drove us to this lifeless rock at the edge of council space. But the tribute system was supposed to be a peace treaty, yes. We agreed to isolation in exchange for resources to survive. Food, water, technology. But the council corrupted it. They send us their trash. Their criminals and outcasts and broken machines. Things they want to dispose of. They hope we'll break the treaty, attack them out of desperation, so they can finish what they started. Jake felt rage building in his chest. And humanity just went along with this? We're part of the council. Your species joined only 3 years ago. You had no voice in ancient history. And frankly, the council treats humans only slightly better than they treat us. You are their newest embarrassment. Jake sat down hard on the stone floor. Everything he'd believed about the Galactic Order, about humanity's place in it, was a lie. The Council wasn't some benevolent organization bringing civilization to the stars. It was a corrupt system built on fear and prejudice. We're alike, you and I, Cyrilleth continued. Both underestimated. Both dismissed as less than we are. The difference is that you still have a chance to prove them wrong. Over the next few weeks, Jake became part of the dragon community. Vorgath, the massive black dragon who'd wanted him dead, began teaching him combat techniques. Not dragon combat, Jake's human body couldn't manage that, but how to think like a warrior, how to read an opponent, how to find weakness in strength. You fight with your mind, Vorgath told him after a particularly brutal training session. Most species fight with what they are born with. Humans fight with what they can build, what they can imagine. It is a different kind of strength. Jake also learned fire singing, though his early attempts were laughable. Dragons created music by controlling the intensity and direction of their flame breath, producing melodies that could convey emotions words couldn't capture. Jake couldn't breathe fire, but he could manipulate thermal vents and flame sources to create crude harmonies. Kyrith was his most patient teacher. You are thinking too much, she said one day. Fire is emotion. Sadness is low and slow. Joy is bright and quick. Anger is sharp and explosive. Feel it, don't calculate it. Jake closed his eyes and tried. He thought about everything that had happened, his court-martial, his imprisonment, being thrown away by his own species. The anger came easily. The thermal vent he was working with erupted in a sharp, violent burst that actually made Kyrith pull back. Yes. Like that. Though perhaps less intense unless you wish to melt the mountain. But it was the quiet conversations with Cyrilleth that changed Jake most profoundly. She taught him about dragon philosophy, about the concept of flame memory, genetic knowledge passed from parent to child through generations. Every dragon carried the memories of their ancestors, an unbroken chain of experience stretching back thousands of years. Humans don't have that, Jake said. We have to learn everything fresh each generation. We make the same mistakes over and over. Perhaps. But you are also not bound by the past. Your minds are free to see possibilities we cannot imagine because we are shackled to tradition. Jake shared human history in return. He told her about wars and peace treaties, about art and music and literature. About how humans had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times but somehow always found a way to survive. About the first time humans saw Earth from space and realized how small and fragile their home was. Your species has fire too, Cyrilleth observed. Not in your breath, but in your spirit. You refuse to accept limitations. It is both your greatest strength and your greatest danger. One evening, Jake stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the volcanic plains. Kyrith landed beside him, her copper scales reflecting the sunset. "Do you miss your home?" she asked. "Every day. But I'm learning something here that I never could have learned on Earth or any council world." "What is that?" Jake turned to look at the young dragon. "That worth isn't measured by what you're born with. It's measured by what you choose to do with what you have. The council looks at humans and sees weakness because we can't do what they can do. They look at dragons and see monsters because they are afraid of your power. But they're wrong about both of us." Kyratha's eyes glowed softly in the dimming light. "My mother says you have changed us, Jake Mitchell. Made us remember that we are more than our exile. More than our pain. And you've changed me. Made me remember that being underestimated is sometimes the best advantage you can have." Neither of them knew that their conversation was being monitored. That far above, council ships were gathering. That humanity's greatest test, and the dragon's final stand, was about to begin. The old communications array had been sitting in a forgotten corner of the dragon caves for decades, a piece of council technology from the original peace treaty. Jake had been tinkering with it for weeks, trying to get it functional again. When it finally crackled to life, he expected static. What he got instead made his blood run cold. Confirm elimination protocol. Target, Dragon Dominion Settlement, Drakmor Volcanic Moon. Authorized by council majority vote. Expected resistance, minimal. Thermal lance deployment approved. Jake's hands shook as he adjusted the frequency, pulling in more of the transmission. His engineering background made decoding council military channels easier than it should have been. Earth's representative objected, naturally. But they were outvoted 37-1. The human specimen we sent as tribute is confirmed dead, so there are no witnesses to our previous arrangement. Once the dragons are eliminated, we can claim they broke the treaty first. Jake slammed his fist on the console. They weren't coming to retrieve him. They were coming to commit genocide and blame it on the dragons. And they thought he was already dead, which meant there'd be no awkward questions about human casualties. He ran through the tunnels, his feet pounding against stone. Dragons looked up in surprise as he sprinted past, but he didn't stop until he reached the great cavern where Cyrilleth held court. "They're coming," Jake gasped, out of breath. "The council. A full military fleet. And they're bringing something called a thermal lance." The gathered dragons stirred uneasily. Vorgath stepped forward, smoke curling from his nostrils. "Let them come. We will burn their ships from the sky." "You don't understand," Jake said urgently. "A thermal lance feeds on heat energy. In a volcanic environment, it'll be unstoppable. It'll turn this entire moon into a weapon against you." Cyrilleth's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Jake pulled out a piece of charcoal and started drawing on the smooth stone floor. "It's a feedback weapon. It absorbs thermal energy from its environment and converts it into a directed energy beam. The hotter the surroundings, the more powerful it becomes. On a volcanic moon like this, surrounded by lava and geothermal activity, it'll have essentially unlimited ammunition." "Then we are doomed," said one of the elder dragons, his silver scales dulled with age. "No." Jake stood up, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. "We're not doomed. But we can't fight this the way dragons normally fight." Vorgath growled. "You would have us flee? Hide like cowards?" "I would have you win. And winning means fighting smart, not hard." Jake turned to Cyrilleth. "How many dragons can fight?" "Perhaps 200 combat-ready adults." "And the council is bringing how many ships?" Jake pulled up the data he'd intercepted. 63 vessels. Including 12 heavy cruisers and a flagship carrier. In a straight fight, they'll overwhelm you with numbers. "Then what do you propose, human?" Vorgath's tone was skeptical but not dismissive. The black dragon had learned to respect Jake's tactical thinking. "We don't give them a straight fight. Dragons fight with honor, right? One-on-one combat, proving your strength. It's part of your culture." Jake started pacing. "The council knows this. They're counting on it. They think you'll charge their ships individually, and they'll pick you off one by one while the thermal lance charges up. So we do what instead?" Jake grinned, and there was something fierce in his expression that made even the dragons pause. "We fight like humans. Dirty, unpredictable, and 3 steps ahead. We turn their expectations against them." Over the next 72 hours, Jake transformed the dragon defense from a traditional honor guard into something the galaxy had never seen before. He organized them into squadrons, not by age or size, but by ability and speed. Fast scouts to harass and confuse. Heavy hitters to strike weak points. Stealth units to target supply lines. The dragons resisted at first. This wasn't how they fought. This wasn't honorable. Honor won't matter if you're all dead, Jake told them bluntly during one heated discussion. The council isn't coming here to give you a fair fight. They're coming to exterminate you and lie about it afterward. You want honor? Survive first. Then we'll talk about honor. Kyreth became his second-in-command, translating his human tactical concepts into terms dragons could understand. She was young enough to see past tradition, smart enough to recognize the value in Jake's approach. We've never fought as a unified force, she told him one night as they reviewed battle plans. Each dragon is trained to be self-sufficient. Relying on others is seen as weakness. That's going to change today. In human military doctrine, we have a saying, no soldier fights alone. Your strength isn't just your fire or your scales. It's every dragon fighting beside you. The council fleet arrived right on schedule. Jake watched from a command post, a natural cave high in the mountains that gave him a view of the entire battlefield. He was connected to the dragons through Cyriletha's psychic network, an odd sensation that felt like having dozens of voices whispering in the back of his mind. The flagship transmitted the expected message. Dragon Dominion, you are in violation of council law. Surrender immediately and submit to judgment. Cyriletha's response was exactly as Jake had scripted, we have violated nothing. We demand council representatives meet with us to discuss these accusations. While the council commanders debated this unexpected request, buying Jake precious minutes, the dragons moved into position. Not charging gloriously into battle, but using the volcanic terrain for cover, positioning themselves at precise coordinates Jake had calculated. The thermal lance began powering up, just as Jake knew it would. The massive weapon extended from the flagship's underbelly, already glowing as it drew energy from the superheated environment. Now, Jake said quietly into the network. Dragons emerged from hiding, but not to attack the ships. Instead, they flew in coordinated patterns around the fleet, breathing fire in specific locations. To the council, it looked like a disorganized assault. But Jake was painting targets, marking weak points in their formation. Second wave, go. Heavier dragons slammed into the marked ships with precision strikes. Engines. Communication arrays. Weapon systems. They weren't trying to destroy the vessels, they were crippling them, turning a fleet into scattered, isolated targets. The thermal lance fired, and its beam carved through stone and vaporized rock. But the target it hit was empty, the dragons had already moved. Jake was keeping them one step ahead, calling positions based on the weapon's charging patterns. They are adapting, Kyreth's voice came through the network. Trying to predict our movements. Good. Let them think they're figuring us out. Jake watched the tactical display he'd cobbled together from salvaged equipment. Third wave, prepare the mirror positions. This was the risky part. Over the past weeks, Jake had noticed something about the volcanic glass formed by rapidly cooling lava. It was incredibly reflective when properly polished. The dragons had been secretly preparing massive sheets of it, positioned at key points around the battlefield. The thermal lance charged for another shot, drawing in enormous amounts of thermal energy from the lava flows below. The weapon glowed white-hot. Now. Dragons flipped the volcanic glass mirrors into position with perfect timing. The thermal lance fired, and its beam hit the first mirror, reflecting at a calculated angle. It bounced to a second mirror, then a third, the beam being redirected through a carefully designed path. Jake had turned the council's own weapon into a pinball. The final mirror pointed straight up, sending the concentrated thermal energy not at the dragons, but into empty space where it dissipated harmlessly into the void. The council fleet fell into chaos. Their primary weapon was useless. Worse than useless, it was a liability. Every time they tried to fire it, the dragons redirected it away. All units, final assault, Jake commanded. Target the flagship. Disable, don't destroy. We need them alive to tell the story. What happened next would become legend among both humans and dragons. 200 dragons moved as a single organism, overwhelming the flagship's defenses through sheer coordinated precision. They tore apart shield generators, melted weapon ports, and stripped the vessel of its ability to fight back, all without killing a single crew member. Within an hour, the council fleet was in full retreat, their flagship dead in space, the thermal lance a useless hunk of metal. Jake stood at the cave entrance, watching them flee. Cyrileth landed beside him, her massive bulk somehow gentle. You did it, she said. You taught us to fight like humans. No, Jake replied. I taught you to fight smart. But the courage, the execution, that was all dragon. I just gave you a different way to use your strengths. Vorgath landed on Jake's other side. The massive black dragon dipped his head in respect. I was wrong about humans, Jake Mitchell. Your species has teeth. They're just not where anyone expected them to be. That's the point, Jake said with a tired smile. Never let them see what's really dangerous about you until it's too late. Kyrith circled overhead, her copper scales gleaming in the firelight. The council will return. They'll come better prepared next time. Let them, Jake said. Because next time, every species they've pushed around will be watching. And they'll all be asking themselves the same question. If humans and dragons can beat the council, what's stopping us? The revolution hadn't started yet. But Jake could feel it coming, as inevitable as dawn. The great cavern was packed with dragons like Jake had never seen before. They filled every ledge, every outcropping of rock, their scales creating a mosaic of colors that glowed in the light of 1,000 flame torches. The air shimmered with their combined body heat, and Jake could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on him like a physical thing. He stood at the center of it all, feeling very small and very human. Cyrilleth was beside him, her crimson scales polished until they gleamed like rubies. Around them, the Dragon Council had assembled, the eldest and wisest of their kind, creatures who had lived through centuries of exile and pain. This is unprecedented, said one of the elders, a dragon whose scales had faded to pale gold with age. The title of Dragon King has been vacant for 1,000 years. Our laws are clear about what the king must be, a warrior, a scholar, a bridge between our people and the outside world. But they also specify that the king must be a dragon. The laws were written in a different time, Cyrilleth replied, her mental voice carrying to every dragon in the cavern. When we had no need for bridges because we had no enemies. The world has changed. We must change with it. Vorgath stepped forward, and the assembled dragons fell silent. The massive black dragon had become something of a legend himself after the battle, the warrior who had learned to fight with strategy instead of just strength. I opposed this human from the beginning, Vorgath said, his voice a deep rumble that echoed off the stone walls. I called him weak. Worthless. I wanted him dead. He turned to look at Jake. I was a fool. This human has proven himself in every trial we set before him. He survived the wasteland. He solved the riddle of flames. He retrieved the heart of Drakmar. And when our very existence was threatened, he led us to victory against impossible odds. The black dragon lowered his massive head in a gesture of respect that made several younger dragons gasp. Jake Mitchell has the heart of a dragon, even if he lacks the body. If the law says only a dragon can be king, then I say the law is blind. He has earned this honor 100 times over. Murmurs rippled through the cavern, a mix of agreement and uncertainty. Change came slowly to dragon society, where tradition was literally embedded in their genetic memories. An elder dragon with silver scales spoke up. But what happens when he dies? Humans live such brief lives, barely a century if they are fortunate. Can we truly place our future in the hands of someone who will be gone in what is, to us, the blink of an eye? Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Kyrith beat him to it. The young copper dragon flew to the center of the gathering, her eyes blazing with passion. Maybe that is exactly what we need, she said. We dragons live for thousands of years. We have the luxury of patience. But that patience has become paralysis. We've spent 8 centuries hiding in these caves, accepting our exile, afraid to dream of anything different. Jake has been with us for only months, and he has already changed everything. Perhaps a short life means not wasting time. Perhaps it means seeing opportunities instead of just obstacles. She turned to face the assembled dragons. My mother healed Jake with dragon fire. That fire is now part of him. He already lives between 2 worlds, human and dragon. He is the bridge we need, whether we admit it or not. Cyrilleth raised her head, and the authority in her bearing silenced all discussion. There will be a vote, as our laws require. But first, Jake Mitchell must choose. We can offer you this title, this burden, but we cannot force it upon you. You have already given us more than we had any right to ask. If you wish to return to your people, we will find a way to make that happen. Jake had been thinking about this moment for days, ever since Cyrilleth had first mentioned the possibility. The smart choice was obvious: go home to Earth, tell his story, probably become famous. He'd proven the council wrong about humans. Mission accomplished. But standing there, surrounded by dragons who had become his friends, his family, Jake realized something. Earth didn't feel like home anymore. The military had cast him out. The council had tried to use him as dragon food. But here, on this volcanic wasteland at the edge of known space, he'd found something he'd never had before, a purpose that mattered. "I'm not going anywhere," Jake said, and his voice was steady. "You saved my life. You gave me a chance when my own species threw me away. These past months have taught me something important. Home isn't a place. It's the people who fight beside you, who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. The dragons are my home now." He looked around at the assembled dragons. "But I need to be clear about something. If you make me your king, I'm not going to just maintain the status quo. I'm going to push for change. I'm going to challenge traditions that don't serve you anymore. I'm going to make alliances with species the Council has rejected, just like they rejected us. It won't be comfortable, and it won't be easy. But I promise you this, I will never stop fighting for the dragons, even if it means fighting the entire galaxy." The silence that followed was profound. Then Vorgath began to roar, a sound that shook the very mountain. Other dragons joined in, their voices combining into a thunderous approval that rolled through the caverns like an earthquake. The ceremony that followed was older than human civilization. Jake stood in a circle of dragon fire, flames dancing around him but not burning, controlled by a dozen elder dragons working in perfect synchronization. Cyrilleth spoke words in ancient Draconic, a language so old that Jake's translator couldn't even begin to interpret it. He felt something change inside him as the ritual progressed. The silvery scars on his hands began to glow, spreading up his arms in intricate patterns. His body temperature spiked, then stabilized at a level that would have killed him months ago. The dragon fire that Cyrilleth had used to heal him was waking up, bonding with his human biology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. When the flames finally died down, Jake was different. Not entirely dragon, but not entirely human anymore either. Something in between. Something new. "Rise, Jake Mitchell, King of the Dragon Dominion," Cyrilleth intoned. "May your reign be measured not in years, but in the changes you bring to our people." Jake stood, and the assembled dragons bowed their heads. The gesture filled him with a responsibility that was almost crushing. These creatures, these magnificent beings that the galaxy had tried to destroy, were trusting him with their future. His first act as king was to abolish the tribute system entirely. "We're done accepting scraps from the Council," he declared. "From now on, the dragons offer their services as protectors, mediators, and teachers to any species willing to treat us with respect. We're not beggars anymore. We're partners." The second act was to extend an invitation to other marginalized species, the ones the Council considered worthless or problematic. Within a week, representatives from 17 different worlds had arrived on Drakmor, all of them species that had been pushed to the edges of Council space. Jake met with each one personally. There was Ambassador Chen from the mining colonies of Kepler 442, humans who'd been forgotten by Earth. There was a delegation of the insectoid Cliff, whose hive intelligence terrified the individualistic Council members. There was even a group of artificial intelligences that had achieved sentience and been promptly outlawed. "We're building something new here," Jake told them during the first assembly. "An alliance based not on power or fear, but on mutual respect and the understanding that being different isn't a weakness, it's a strength. The Council has spent centuries trying to make everyone fit their narrow definition of civilized. We're going to show them there's another way." The news of Jake's coronation spread through Council space like wildfire. The response was predictable: outrage, threats, demands that the dragons release their hostage and submit to Council authority. 3 months later, Jake stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time, he wasn't a prisoner or a piece of refuse to be disposed of. He was a king, and behind him stood not just dragons, but representatives from 24 species that had joined his alliance. The council chamber was deathly silent as Jake approached the central podium. High Councilor Vex crystalline form refracted light in sharp, angry patterns. "This is an outrage," Vex began. "You were sent to the dragons as tribute, and now you claim to speak for them? This is a violation of..." "Of what?" Jake interrupted, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "Of your plan to eliminate the dragons and blame them for it? Of your system that keeps half the galaxy living in fear while you exploit them? Let's be honest about what this is really about, Counselor." He pulled up holographic displays showing the intercepted communications, the thermal lance deployment orders, everything. The evidence was damning, and it was public now, broadcast across every council network where Jake's new allies had made sure it couldn't be deleted or hidden. "You tried to commit genocide," Jake continued. "And when that failed, you expected us to just quietly go away. But here's the thing about species you consider worthless: we're survivors. We're adaptable. And we're done accepting your version of how the galaxy should work. Director Hayes, Earth's representative, stood up. The man looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few months. Jake, as a representative of humanity, I apologize for what was done to you. I fought against the decision to. I know you did, Director. And I appreciate it. But I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to announce that the Dragon Dominion, along with our 24 allied species, are formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We're forming our own coalition, one based on equality and mutual aid rather than hierarchy and fear. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates were outraged. Others looked thoughtful, calculating. A few, representatives from species that had long chafed under council rule, looked hopeful. You cannot simply, Vex began. We can, and we are. The council has no authority over sovereign species that choose to leave. You wrote that into your own charter. Jake smiled. I read the bylaws. All of them. Turns out humans are pretty good at finding loopholes. He turned to address the entire assembly. To any species here that's tired of being told they're not good enough, not powerful enough, not worthy of respect, our alliance is open to you. Come to Drakmar. See what we're building. Decide for yourselves. As Jake left the chamber, he could feel dozens of eyes on him. Some filled with hatred, others with curiosity, and a few with something that might have been admiration. Outside, Kyrith waited for him, her copper scales gleaming in the starlight. How did it go? Jake climbed onto her back, something that would have been unthinkable months ago, and she took flight, carrying him away from the council station toward the ship that would take them home. I think we just started a revolution, Jake said. Good, Kyrith replied. It's about time. Below them, the galaxy turned, ancient and vast. But somewhere in that endless dark, things were changing. The species the council had dismissed were finding their voices, their strength, their fire. And at the center of it all was a human who'd been thrown away like trash, who'd been given to dragons as food, and who'd become a king instead. The galaxy would never be the same.